Zola, do you ever think about what Africa would look like in the next 50 or 100 years?
Africa? What's there to think about Africa? I mean, I'm here to figure out my life, not to talk of almighty Africa. Anyway, why do you ask?
Well, given the situation of Africa in the past, and I wonder if things would get better by then. You know, I read in the news that in some parts of Africa, people don't even have access to good schools, proper healthcare, and even basic amenities everyone should have.
50 years is a long time, but I believe things will be better then.
Me too. You know, sometimes I just wish I had the power to change things.
As African youth, we have the power to create the Africa we want.
My goods have been there for over 5 months. I haven't been able to trade because they've shut down the borders.
Wow, Charlie, you are still worried about your goods. My business has been shut down because of inadequate power supply. I wonder when we'll have steady power supply in this part of Africa, eh?
I wonder too. It's just so annoying.
We desire and demand an Africa that is peaceful and secure. An Africa where young and old, men and women, girls and boys from all walks of life are united in their diversity. An Africa whose growth and development are sustainable and inclusive, benefiting and bringing prosperity to all its citizens. An integrated continent, politically united, based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's Renaissance. An Africa where good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law are the guiding principles of our societies. This is an Africa where we are confident in our identity, heritage, and culture, and shared values. Our very thriving Africa where young people contribute at all levels of society. And ultimately, an Africa which is an influential global player responsible for managing her resources and financing her peace and development. Let us unite.
Very good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where and when you are watching us from. My name is Mutathi Wachira and Policy wa mbari ya Karingithi na ngwihoka kuma ngongo ciothe iria ciumaga huho muri thayo. Today is a really good day. Finally, we are here with Timothy Mabango to have these discussions that we have been talking about. And yeah, so nothing much. This is African Kona episode 47. I don't want to waste a lot of time in introductions and everything, but just before we go live, I'd like to remind everybody that if you're before we continue the conversation, if you're still watching and you haven't subscribed, you can kindly do so that you can be able to be following us as we proceed with the conversations. Mabango Timothy, how are you? I hope you can hear me quite clear from that side.
Fine, thank you, Wachira. It's been quite a while, but I'm happy to be part of this conversation again. Like I keep saying, following the wording of Socrates, I know that I know nothing. We are all here to learn. Let's engage through the comment section and all that. And we hope to take the conversation about Africa further to make it the Africa we want. Thank you once again, and yeah, hope to learn.
Yeah, before we continue the conversation, let me just remind them what we do here at Wachira Speaks using this video once again. Yeah. I can see now guys are here, so we can proceed with the conversation. I can see Kimani Mwangi saying great to be here. Thank you, Kimani. Fredbon Congo, the lost son, says who else is here? How are you, Africa? And just in case he's asking why haven't we started, we have started and we are live right now. So, team, we have been talking about the aspirations of Africa, the 7 aspirations of AU Agenda 2063. And before even we get to the aspirations themselves, I think it will be really wise if you just talk to us basically, what do we mean? Provide us a brief overview of the Agenda 2063 for those who do not know what it is before we even start talking about the aspirations, the 7 aspirations. So you can maybe just briefly tell us, what is this Agenda 2063, and if you can also possibly talk us through briefly the introduction of the 7 aspirations of this agenda that we are talking about, Mabango.
Thank you once more. The African Union Agenda 2063, and in this particular context, of course, we'll be looking at the 7 aspirations of the agenda. It became ratified in 2015. It's like, okay, in the layman's language, the way we look at Vision 2030, for example. So Agenda 2063 is a vision for Africa. If you look at that document, it's written African Union Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. It's a vision of the Africa that we Africans really want in terms of an Africa-centric Africa. One, looking at the 7, actually, let me read through all the 7 so as to give it the specific context. The first aspiration is a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. The second aspiration is an integrated continent, politically united, based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's renaissance. The third aspiration is an Africa of good governance, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. The fourth one is a peaceful and secure Africa. The fifth one is an Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. The sixth one is an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of African people, especially its women and youth, and caring for children. And lastly, aspiration number 7 is Africa as a strong, united, resilient, and influential global player and partner. In short, it's a vision for reorienting Africa so as to maximize the potential we have, to position ourselves internally as a powerhouse, so as to impact even up to the globe. So basically, that's an overview of the aspirations of the Agenda 2063, having been ratified in 2015. Calculating it up to 2063, it's about, should be 40, no, not 44, 40, 48 years, 48 years since 2015. So currently where we are counting 39 more. Where we are at.
And maybe even before we talk more into the aspirations, because I would like us to go, one by one, the 7 aspirations. Before even we do that, maybe Mabango, as a policy expert, because now you've been doing this for some time, you can tell us why is it necessary for us to have this conversation? Because some people are saying, these guys are just here to talk about some, let me not use that word. Maybe let me use nonsense. Why are these people talking about this? Why is it so important? Maybe you can just tell us, why is it so important for us to have this kind of discussion in Africa?
Okay, for those who've been following me, especially through LinkedIn, there are a few pointers that I put there. For example, do you know that actually Africa is the most significant producer of diamonds? 70% of world cocoa comes from Africa. Looking at archaeology, or rather history and geography, you find that Africa is the cradle of mankind. Philosophers like Socrates, Thales, Aristotle, all studied at some point in Africa and actually lived here and studied under Africans. You look at the potential of Africa in terms of raw materials, resources, and everything, and you find that we are an underutilized continent. I was recently reading some article about actually ranking of countries in Africa in terms of poverty, and shockingly enough, Sudan was ranked the poorest country. And when you look at the potential of South Sudan in terms of oil, minerals, and all that, and it's not only South Sudan, literally all countries in Africa have a vast amount of resource. But when you look at what we really have on the ground in terms of economic potential, in terms of even being a donor, none of us, as at this moment, is a donor in the world stage, despite being a rich continent. So this conversation about Agenda 2063, or I would even call it Vision 2063, was to reassess ourselves. What exactly, as Africans, where exactly are we going wrong? What can we do to position ourselves as a global power? Because I believe that is what we have. I don't know if really I've answered your question.
Yeah, you have, because we were having a conversation last week with a very good friend from all the way from Zimbabwe. And Muvavariroa was saying that Africans, we are really lost and it is high time we start, going back to our roots. And I'm just asking myself, you'll answer me this slowly as we continue to progress through the conversation, is whether the Agenda 2063 will really help Africans, to get back to what they want to get back to. Will it position us the way we want to be positioned in the world? So I think we will have that answer maybe within the conversation. I can see just in case I send in a comment saying that I would have preferred if they made it shorter so that they come up with more realistic goals, like a 10-year plan segment, for instance, 2024 to 2034. I can also see Fred Congo says, I am Bako Shira. I am not a lost son, just been here and there, but I will not miss this one. I love this African channel. And you know that. Welcome to the official African channel, guys. Thank you. And then we see just in case saying the Africa we want in 2063. And then Mary Wajiko saying tuned. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in live. Mabango, you see, I also think in the same line of just in case here. He says that the Africa, Union should have made it a little bit shorter, because I also prefer, 50-year plan it's kind of long, and being Africans, I don't know how it will go. But either way, just hold it on there. Let us go through the aspirations and let us go one by one. Like our first aspiration that we'll be talking about is a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. So let me repeat that again for the people who have not got it. It's a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. And basically what I understand this aspiration to be talking about, it is talking about mostly the economic aspect of the Agenda 2063. And I'd like to pose a question to you, Mabango, as the expert. You can tell us, how can African countries, be able to balance between rapid economic development with sustainable environmental policies? Because right now we are seeing, the environment, the climate change, blah, 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 all that thing, and it is valid and it is right. However, for us to have that rapid economic growth, like what happened during the Industrial Revolution, sometimes the environment is compromised. So what do we do now? How can African countries in this continent be able to put a balance between that economic development with sustainable environmental practices?
Thank you for that question. And even before I respond to that, there's this concern we've seen in the comment, and I think you've agreed, and I also agree about it being shortened. In project management, which is also a field I've ventured into, we talk of iterative implementation in terms of, for example, if we have a 50-year vision, it's more prudent, for example, to implement it 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, so that we keep learning based on context, environment, blah, blah, blah. So for Agenda 2063, as a matter of fact, when it was actually ratified in 2015, there was the first 10-year implementation plan. So yes, it's being implemented in terms of 10 years, 10 years, 10 years. On the concern about sustainability, there's this quote by Chinua Achebe. For today, you'll actually be happy that I'll be quoting more of African philosophers more than the way I'm used to quoting people from far off. Chinua Achebe told us that if you don't like someone's story, write your own. Why do I speak about liking someone's story and writing our own? This whole conversation, and I'll be a bit unconventional in this one, the whole conversation about climate change and everything, from a geopolitical perspective, I believe the Westerners, I boldly say the Westerners, have pioneered this conversation. Why do I say so? The biggest polluters of the climate of this world, and actually the biggest contributors to the problems we are facing in terms of weather, unpredictable climate, typhoons, what do I say, ice melting and all that, are the Westerners. So they've brought this conversation to limit us. It's like causing a problem, then gaslighting those with whom you're partnering with. I do not say that there is not a climate problem. Of course, I agree. And to directly answer your question, how do we manage between rapid industrialization and balancing with climate change? First and foremost, I am a believer of stakeholder collaboration. What I mean by this is that policymakers, we have our politicians, we have our industry experts, they should collaborate and come up with sustainable solutions to our industrialization. Mostly in Africa, we find that sustainability is a challenge, mainly because politicians are our primary decision makers. And when they make these decisions, usually they have to please the public, because whether we like it or not, in 5 years, 4 years, 7 years, you'll still have to go to the ground to seek those votes. So at times you have to please the public. Another aspect of the political paradigm is that, and actually I'm happy to be in Kenya, you see, like our president, I was looking at what critics were saying about his tax regimes and everything, and his tours to the West and all that. And I think I agree with them on one point. When somebody lends you money, he controls your decisions. Why do I say this? Whenever the IMF gives us, for example, loans or funds towards these climate change initiatives and everything, there are strings attached. So political decision making without engaging, for example, experts in climate and all that is usually detrimental. So the primary way of fixing this challenge, or rather the primary way of ensuring climate sustainability coupled with the rapid industrialization, will be to engage experts in that. Yes, that's the primary solution. That's how we can balance. There is no other way. Engage everyone who is concerned and find the right way. We have to do it correct. Yes.
I don't know if you've been following what is happening today in Nairobi. There is a meeting in at the KICC, you know, for the Africa Development Bank and the African, fund. Have you heard anything that is going on there that is sort of related to this aspiration, this number one aspiration of a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth?
For the KICC event, I'm actually, okay, I haven't really followed it keenly, but we have heads of state. Okay, according to how I'm responding, have I really gotten your question right? Are you talking of the African Development Bank meetings?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm asking whether that meeting so far, because it's supposed to run for some couple of days, whether it has been able to because if I'm looking at that meeting, it should be in line with its aspiration, because you're talking about sustainable development, and that's where the African Development Bank really come in. So I don't know whether but if you haven't followed, let me not ask more about that, because we wait to see how the meeting will go on. But today I've seen Kagame was in the country, and the former president was also here. So we want to see eventually what will come out of that meeting. Somebody by the name Joseph Ombua saying he's tuned in. And then we have Fred Bonkongo saying that, do you know do you know how many policies we have, but they are placed in shelves and hard disks somewhere? It is very easy to come up with a policy, but implementation of the policy and to have it fully functional. And then it says, number two, if this African agenda was to be successful, then it will have been made a 10-year plan with phases of implementation. Through this, you can improve on the policy gaps and strengthen the policy. And then number three says, achieving any tangible result of a policy needs a lot of work and seriousness. This means that Africa must be very careful, and her leaders be very vigilant in the implementation plan. Wow, thank you, Fredman, for that comment. So that's aspiration number one. Let us go on to aspiration number two rather, which is aspiration number two is also an interesting one, because it talks of an integrated continent, politically united and based on the ideals of Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's Renaissance. Now, team, and I like that we are having this conversation just immediately after the President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, has come back from the United States. A tour that was faced with a lot of controversy. And there are some people who are saying, we have been sold. There is no spirit of Pan-Africanism there. And right now we are talking of the aspiration of the IAU, and they're talking about an integrated continent, politically united, and the ideas of Pan-Africanism. First of all, what are your thoughts? What are your sentiments on that visit that the president had? And do you think it really even goes in line with this aspiration?
About our president, and again, I'll be controversial for the second time. Being in Kenya and looking at how things are, and I'd like to position this in line with what the reporter should be Abdikadir, what the reporter asked the president while in the US. How comes you're planning to solve security problems in Haiti? And recently I also have not yet confirmed, that the EU and the US have recommended Kenya to be part of the team that will be fighting, or rather partnering with security agencies against the Houthis of Yemen. Looking at Kenya, of course, we are in Kenya, we know what is in the ground. It might not really be in the media, but the issue of banditry, cattle rustling is not solved 100%. So if we cannot fix our problems internally, then going to solve external problems would be more of pretense. It's more of a facade. About the visit to the US, I wouldn't really say there is any Pan-Africanism in that, even starting with the issue of, and it was actually in the news, the plane that he used, it must have been a jet or something. I do not have the exact figures, but the expenditure was to the tunes of almost $500 million. Yet KQ, according to the memo they later released, they could have charged under 40 million. So when you look at all that, and even the president goes to his social media to say it was a cheaper option and all that, I believe it would be a lie. Another thing, Chinua Achebe told us that a man belongs to his fatherland when things are good and life is sweet, but when there is sorrow and bitterness, he finds refuge in his motherland. The truth is, we are the ones who know the problems that we have in Africa. On what basis would you be going to promote agenda of Africa or Kenya or whichever jurisdiction within Africa? On what ground will you be going to find those solutions in another country? So in terms of Pan-Africanism, definitely not true. And actually, talking of aspiration number two, part of aspiration number two is having a federal, or rather a confederate, a united Africa. Part of the things the late Muammar Gaddafi was trying to think of. You see, when we have such divisions in terms of some of us are liberal, some are radical, some are pretenders, some are true to word in terms of Pan-Africanism, such things like the state visit that our president had to the US, despite the goodies, which again come with strings attached, they create divisions and they take us further away from our vision of a united Africa, according to aspiration number 2 of Agenda 2063.
You see, Tim, even before we go on, just speaking on to this aspiration number 2, we also talk about politically united, an integrated continent, politically united. Exactly, that's what the aspiration says. And you see, what I'm asking myself is then how are we able to do this? Because currently, as it is, very well, we are experiencing a lot of challenges. We have a lot of challenges being politically integrated and being, there's a lot of political barriers and economic barriers that are really limiting Africa to be an integrated continent. So you as the expert here, maybe you can tell us how can African nations overcome this? Because what I'm hearing from South Africa and from Julius Malema, he's saying that once he becomes president, he is going to open the borders and he's going to advise and advocate for Africa to do the same. Because even in Europe, the borders are they don't have borders. You can move very easily. So what do you think? How can we as Africans be able to overcome such kind of barriers?
And I actually love that you've mentioned Julius Malema. Those are part of the radical Pan-Africans. By radical, I mean they would do anything to ensure that Africa stands pure in the context of having everything that belongs to us remain to us and having systems that perpetuate our vision and our agenda purely on the basis of our mentality, our thinking, and our culture. I was reading a book called Necropolitics. It's by Achille Mbembe. Well, there's a quote I got from there that the ultimate expression of sovereignty resides to a large degree in the power and the capacity to dictate who may live and who must die. Currently, as things stand, over 95%, I don't know if I got the statistics right, of Africa in terms of countries still have Western systems. Ever since we were colonized, we really never left our ex, basically, you find that systems like democracy, well, democracy can be good, can be bad, can work, can fail. There are countries in which democracy has worked. There are those in which it hasn't worked. So, okay, there's actually another question that people have been asking me. We keep saying that solutions to Africa are within Africa. So what can we really do? What political system or structure can we have to ensure that Africa progresses? And my answer is as simple: be it dictatorship, be it democracy, be it authoritarianism, be it aristocracy, whatever works in that particular context, in that particular nation, that should actually be the system that guarantees the progress of that particular jurisdiction. So for Africa, for long, including even in our education system, our schooled and 844 system and what we've been taught really glorifies democracy. For Africa, I don't think democracy might just be our perfect solution. We had an individual like Thomas Sankara. I like giving an example of him, the same to people like Muammar Gaddafi, and currently Captain Ibrahim Traore. Well, they're from the military, and most of them did not get to power, actually all of them, and examples may abound, did not get to power through democracy, but the things they did, and Traore is doing for his country, looking at it in like 10, 15, 20 years, I believe it could lead to a progress. So to answer your question, things that we could do, first and foremost, disband our colonizers' mentalities, thinking, and culture. Let's work with our own system like Rwanda is doing. Rwanda is not really a perfect democracy. And well, China is not even a perfect democracy, but we can see its positioning itself to be a major superpower. Currently, we do not have, how is it called? There is not one superpower, but rather several. We've seen BRICS and everything. And the only thing that would position a country to progress and to be a superpower. And in this context, I'm talking of a federal Africa. What would work for us is having systems that are purely African. So disband Western systems, disband our colonizer systems, and implement. And I actually have seen a comment by Fred Bonkongo talking of having our policies purely on shelves rather than in practice. Well, that is actually true. And one thing I believe in is that even if we implemented even 5% of what we have on paper, because we have good policymakers, we have good papers written, even Agenda 2063, if you look at it objectively, if it is implemented even 5%, it's enough to take Africa forward. So yes, be objective about it, be practical about it, and stop not only talking about it, but it's something we should start implementing. We should stop holding conferences everywhere, conference in Addis Ababa, conference in Ethiopia, conference in the US. It's high time we start implementing the little, and it's not actually little, the much that we have. Once we implement it, we are on the right path. These things are possible.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, team. I understand you, because it's also as simple as basically what you're just saying in simple words is, let us decolonize the mind. Let us decolonize the mind, and because even in the language, it's really my hope that one day our children and our children's children can be able to speak in Kiswahili and speak with a friend from Zimbabwe, with a friend in Nigeria with the same language. You see, right now we cannot be able to do that. But this is Africa, and eventually, if at all things are going to change, then it is only us who are supposed to do that. Let us move on to agenda number 3 rather, that is an Africa of good governance, respect for human rights, and justice and the rule of law. An Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. Tim, I don't know even if it will be prudent of us to discuss about this in the context that Africa is in, because first of all, talk of good governance. Africa has, to be honest, I'm an African, let us talk the truth. We have among the worst governance in the world. And then respect for human rights, I think here human rights are defined the way people want to define them. I remember PLO Lumumba says that that Africa should be able to define some things for themselves, and then justice, and talk about the rule of law. What we have been seeing, especially in the West, and these democracies, or if you can just use that democracy, phrase for lack of a better one, is that these nations that are not really democratic, mature in Africa, have really failed in this aspiration number 3, because you're not seeing good governance, you're not seeing justice, you're not seeing the rule of law. A lot of coups are happening in the West, and people are actually saying that it's okay, and they actually, I don't know how they are able to justify that, but I cannot speak because maybe the context is different. So my question to you in very brief manner is, what measures are being taken to ensure this is happening in Africa? What measures are we doing to ensure that this aspiration at the end of the day is going to come to life?
Currently, if I can be honest with you, I've even studied the structure of the African Union and its various bodies and everything. There isn't any particular measure to implement this Agenda 2063. It's more of a generic, it's like a template. For us to achieve this, we can implement ABCD, then get to it. So clearly there is no measure, or rather parameter or yardstick to implement this. Even looking at aspiration number 2, I'll just touch on it like for a second or two. It states that by 2030, Africa will be united. Clearly, you can see even from the language, it was more of a template. On the language of aspiration number 3, again, I beg to be controversial. Truly speaking, looking at the textual understanding of aspiration number 3, it's Western oriented, because there is no particular way of defining democracy. And after all, democracy, for what we know it is, it may not actually be a rule of the people, because it's usually a tyranny of the majority. What if the minority, like let's say me and yourself and a few experts, have the best idea to help the people? Will we really be doing them justice by having a majority who might actually be corrupted by monies and everything? Can we really take Africa forward through democracy? There's something, and today I'm really quoting Chinua Achebe, after having read books like Things Fall Apart, You Just Fall in Love with this particular individual. Chinua Achebe told us that when a tradition gathers enough strength to go on for centuries, you don't just turn it off one day. For Africa, these things about respect for human rights, democracy, these are things that we were taught. Originally in Africa, we had our elders and everything. We had things like corporal punishment, and indeed, there was justice in the society. So having a language, or rather thinking that is Western-based, may not take us the places that we indeed envision in the Agenda 2063. So as a policy student, I'll actually tell you the best thing we can do. In fact, for aspiration number 3, perhaps the language should be changed to fit into the context of Africa, because there are different ways of dealing with individuals. Depending on your country, depending on your systems, there are places in which, honestly speaking, dictatorship might actually be the solution, and disrespect for human rights may actually solve the problems. So I know I'm sounding a bit rigid, a bit controversial.
Okay.
So there is no mechanism to implement it. And second, it's not the best policy that we have to envision having good governance, having democracy, and having respect for human rights and things like that we've been taught by the Wazungus. So let's have an Africa
Even
with our
Jim,
own system, with our own
as we are
thinking,
looking
our
at
own
the
thinking, and let's work the way we know, depending on the people. If people are too crude, treat them crudely. For as long as once we have a vision that this is the best way to achieve this, achieve it through whichever the means. That is my 2 cents on the subject.
I think, Jim, you're just basically telling us that an eye for an eye. But even look at it this way, because this aspiration number 4, I honestly don't think it was really thought clearly with Africans. And because actually agenda number 4, or the aspiration number 4, goes against aspiration number 3. Why? Because aspiration number 3 talks to us about the spirit of Pan-Africanism and the African Renaissance, and then you come and bring some things that do not even make sense in the African context. Somebody has to really understand that deeply, because now, even in that aspiration number 3, number 4, especially number 4, we are looking at the influence of the international community and these civil societies, because they'll come and tell you, no, this is not justice, this is not human right, this is not, and because of this, we are banning you, we're not giving you this, a lot of things. But either way, it is. I think it just does not make a lot of sense. And I think, Mabango, what you should do is stop apologizing, because you're an expert and you're just be straight to the point. And actually, I can see Kemani is saying the same thing. Kemani is saying that Mabango, stop apologizing for being straightforward. It's just plainly right. And then we have somebody by the name Niva Beldin saying tune in till the end. Thank you, Niva. And then Fred Bond also has some comments coming in thick and fast. He say, honestly, I foresee danger in the implementation of the agenda. African leaders have never been serious. Today, we are Pan-Africanists. Tomorrow, we are the West bootlicking. Oh, sorry. And then he talks about our very own Mr. Bill. Here was the champion of Pan-Africanism spirit, where he was campaigning anew in office. That was very promising. He even talked of having a common African currency for trade. But today, Mr. Bill preached water and drinks wine. Everywhere he goes, he talks of Africa, but gets goodies for himself alone. Is this really Pan-Africanism? Is this how we are fueling Agenda 2063? Okay. And then Kemani Mwangi says, are these aspirations defined? Are they just mere words? I believe that in their definitions during inception, it should be clear how they will be implemented. Otherwise, they are just words. And then on the critique, Fredman Congo says, as Mabango has just said, first things first, our problem is that we are still under colonization. Let's talk facts. No matter how many African meetings we hold, if we do not decolonize our system, I think that we don't have democracies in Africa. We have kaki- so catastrophic organizations and structures of government which don't have regard for humanity. We have a long way to go to achieve anything African. Sad. Okay, so Mabango, a lot of comments coming in thick and fast. Maybe you cannot be able to read all of them because you have to really go through these aspirations. But we appreciate everybody who's sending in their comments. And I can see that people are interested with this, and especially whether these are just words, are they just mere words, or they were actually intended to be implemented. Because when I was reading that document, even the way they are saying they'll implement it doesn't really hold so much water. But it's okay. Let us go to agenda number 4, or the aspiration number 4, which is a peaceful and secure Africa. This is direct. This is so direct, and it is easy for somebody to understand, even layman to understand. So, Mabango, why do you think we lack peace and security in Africa? Because why have we never realized that we should be peaceful? But the aspiration says that a peaceful and secure Africa. Why?
The main problem about Africa and peace is the issue of colonialism. Usually what happens, psychologists will talk to you about frustration aggression theory. That is also part of human behavioral science. Usually when humans are disenfranchised, or rather when they're under-equipped from what they actually deserve, you find that they become bitter. So Africa literally had everything that it needs to achieve what it wants, but some people who are more powerful at the time, more powerful especially in terms of knowledge more than everything, because when we look at human resource and all that, I believe we are stronger, we had the numbers and everything, but courtesy of, being told that we are bringing you this system, we are giving you guns, give us cocoa and such things. So you find that most of our resources were used to build regions elsewhere, regions like France, regions like the UK, whose success lies in the sweat and blood of daughter Africa. So why do we lack peace as Africa? First and foremost, bitterness. Because, Wachira, how would you feel literally knowing that, for example, you belong to a royal family and yet all through you've been growing as a pauper? So there's that bitterness. Second, you find that Africa, looking at the statistics, our population keeps growing, yet resources like land, jobs, and all that, they're diminishing. So when demand and supply do not match, there cannot be peace. Another thing, there's the division that colonialism brought us. For the colonialists, they used mostly divide and rule. By divide and rule, this is what we mean. Divide these people according to clans and all that, then it's so easy to rule them, because once Wachira, for example, thinks because he's, for example, Rendile and team here is a Borana, that we cannot unite because we have different values, yet in actual sense, we are Africans and our culture is more or less the same. You find that there's such division. There are Luos in Kenya, there are Luos in Tanzania, there are Luos in Uganda, yet at some point they were all together. We find there are Maasais in Kenya, there are Maasais in Tanzania, yet divided by borders. Again, not borders that we instituted, we owners of this land, but borders that the colonialists instituted. So such are the things that bring us a lack of peace. To touch briefly on aspiration number 4, on a peaceful and secure Africa, I'd like to say that we should protect what we have. Whenever we identify a leader like, for example, Captain Ibrahim Traore, or an individual like Julius Selo Malema, such are the individuals we should protect even by our own blood, even if it means us, for example, camping at the White House or the State House or whichever places they stay. Till these individuals lead us to the goals that we have, we will never have a peaceful and secure Africa. So we lack peace because of the division that was brought to us by colonialism, because of the theft that was done by colonialists, and because of the differential thinking. We keep thinking we're different, yet all in all, we are all one and the same. So Those are my two cents
You
on
know,
the story.
I read somewhere that
Yeah.
Africans should know that we are one, because if the colonizers can come back, if they ever come back, then we'll realize we are one. But right now, people pretend as if they're not one. And I saw that actually, you know, today the elections of South Africa are happening today, you know, and one of the campaign trails, Malema was saying, you know, he was making sure that he's repeating that he'll open the borders, because that was one of the things that was bringing controversy, especially in that period. But because I also believe that it is high time that Africans open their borders, because you even go, for example, you go to Namanga here, the border of Kenya and Tanzania, and you have to come with so many documents. The people there, the attitude of the people there, it's so negative, and then you wonder. I was so shocked, because now you're wondering, oh my goodness, are we not supposed to be one people? You know, and yet you're saying it should be peaceful and it should be secure. I think it all begins in the mind, the attitude, you know. Anyway, moving on to aspiration number 5. Aspiration number 5 talks of something that I'm very interested with, and I can't wait to hear what Mabango will say about it. An Africa with a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. So this is aspiration number 5 of the AU Agenda 2063. And here, you know, they are talking about a strong cultural identity, common heritage, values, and ethics. For me, I liked this. I really appreciate what they wanted to do with this aspiration, or what they were aspiring, if I can put it clearly, because you do understand that Africa is a culturally diverse continent, and that is one of the beauties that it has. So, Mabango here, maybe you can tell us, as an expert in this field. I'm very interested to hear what you think, especially of this aspiration in a modern Africa, because you know we are now in a modern Africa, and by the time 2063 will be here, it will be even more modern. Africa will be even more modern, because I'm looking at those will be our children or our grandchildren there, because things will be different. So what now? The question of a common heritage in a diverse continent arises. I just want to know, what are your thoughts now, especially on that aspect, that we should have a common heritage as Africans, but you know we are not blinded, we are not blind to the fact that we still have a diverse continent. Look at the North, especially. You know, the North, some of them claim they're not Africans. So let us even talk about sub-Saharan Africa, or what philosophers say Africa proper. How does that now how do we make sense of this?
With regards of having a strong cultural identity and common value system, a common heritage, it's just a matter of global positioning. What do I mean when I say the same? And it's good you've given an example of sub-Saharan Africa and the Maghreb. I like calling it the Maghreb. We talk of countries like Algeria, Morocco, you know, these countries whose residents or other citizens think they're part of the Arab world and not Africa. To institute a strong cultural identity, first and foremost, we need to distance ourselves from the external parties. For example, for the Maghreb, in terms of talking of Pan-Africanism, they need to distance themselves from the Arab world. Yes, they can partner economically and all that, but in terms of culture, irrespective of our color, religion, or race, for as long as we are positioned within this continent, our thinking should be limited only to the context of this particular continent. For the rest, for example, you find, and again, I'll still talk about colonialism, time, and again, you find that the French, for example, their system was less of divide and rule and more of, what is the word, assimilation. So by assimilation, you're taught a foreign culture, a foreign language. So you find that everything you do, everything you think, and even how you eat, how you dress, you've copied it from the West. So when we distance ourselves from our former colonizers and from individuals and groups, and powers that are not from Africa, I think it's so easy to get it. It's so easy to get it. So yes, that is it. And again, looking at examples of individuals like Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther King, and at some point, when you look at American history, individuals like Frederick Douglass, those are individuals who achieved what they did. Yes, they were in foreign soil. They were actually in the US. All these names were in the US, but by distancing themselves from foreign power and foreign influence, they were able to achieve Pan-Africanism at that point, and they were ambitious enough. They were even planning to retransport Africans, those of African descent, through a ship, bring them to Africa so that we can develop Africa, because most of us have been taken and are building cultures across the globe, yet leaving our home in a depraving state. So we need to distance ourselves from.
I understand you. Especially this makes a lot of sense, or it should really inspire the people who are, the Africans in diaspora, because I personally am interested in a strong cultural identity, because for me, identity is where things start making sense and start moving, because it is from even this identity that we start decolonizing our minds and, associating ourselves, progressively. But now I'm worried, because the more we go on and the more we proceed as Africa, the more we are losing our cultural identity, leave alone of the entire continent, even the individual human, beings and individual communities that are there in Africa. But at the end of the day, we hope for the best. Aspiration number 6. Before we talk about aspiration number 6, we have some comments coming in. Victor Allen saying this is a great conversation, and then we have great discussion. Tashi Wamboi saying great discussion, and then Benedict Joyce saying we still need some European concepts for Africa to grow. We need to use their political ideas like those of Thomas Hobbes without copying their culture. Benedict Joyce is a philosopher from the University of Trangaza University. So when you hear him talk about philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, I think he should also tell us how then do we do that without copying their culture, copying this culture of these European people. Anyway, let us proceed to agenda number 6, which reads as an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential offered by African people, especially its women and youth, and caring for children. Mabango, this is like a joke. I read it and I was just laughing, because to me this is just like, I'm sorry to say this, but it's like a joke, because when does this, how do we even have, how are Africans making sure this is happening? They talk of people driven, blah blah blah. How's the AU doing that?
To directly respond to your question, there are events, though they did not happen in Africa, events like the Enlightenment, the Great Awakening. So to make it people-driven, it starts from within. On LinkedIn, I love talking about personal development. And one thing I keep telling people is that validation is from within. You cannot change the world without changing yourself. Is it the Chinese, or let me just say the Asians? They keep talking of the inner chi, like you activate the inner energy first, change yourself from within, and extend that energy outwards onto people. So change society one person at a time. That is how you make it people-driven. Things like the Great Awakening, you find we have names that were responsible, or rather that pioneered that religious reawakening. So it starts from, what should I say, personal conviction, personal change, having a vision for the world, and in this context, Africa. Once, for example, individuals like me and you, and let me include even the writers of this agenda, once they have this vision, they need to live the vision, talk the vision, and walk the vision. That's the only way of making it people-driven. And I have something funny to talk about caring for children. We were discussing with somebody about the whole work of feminism and all this, and cases about child support and everything. And looking at the hierarchy, women are protected, followed by children. Then you find animals like dogs, boscos, and all that. And then after that, men follow. So that was on a light note. But to directly answer your question, and I already did, to make it people driven, one person at a time.
Yeah.
Live the change, talk the change, and walk the change.
You know, for me, what I meant when I'm saying it's a joke, it's not the aspiration itself, but the way we are purporting to to put this aspiration into reality. Because how is Africa? I'm looking at the countries in Africa and tell me how women and youth are you know. Anyway, I can see Benedict Joyce saying that our cultural identity started when in primary school, when we given a sack to where when we were caught speaking local dialect like Kamba. Anyway, you see, Benedict Joyce, I'll tell you like what Mabango is saying. It has to start from you. You see, Benedict Joyce is saying they took away his cultural identity, but you see, he's named himself Benedict Joyce. So it should start from you, my friend, wherever you are, so that it starts from you. Yourself, because you say we lost the cultural identity from the school where the issues of wearing a sack was introduced to those for those who dared to speak in local language and English was elevated. It is true, it is true. But now what happens now? We should start doing something, stop lamenting and moving forward. And last but not least, aspiration number 7, which is an interesting one, if I can put it like that, because for me, I really found it interesting. Aspiration number 7 is Africa as a strong, united, resilient, and influential global player and partner. Africa as a strong, united, resilient, and influential global player and partner. You see, Mabango, I don't even want to ask you any question. Talk to us about this before even I say anything on it.
Actually, to deviate a little bit, and of course, to make this on a light note, I feel attacked when you talk of names because, as a matter of fact, I have a Christian name, of course, not African. I have 2 African names, and one is Mzungu. Well, I'll talk less of that. How we can have Africa as a strong, united, resilient, and influential global player and partner. For this particular aspiration, to start with the wording, it looks like generic, just like I said. Practically speaking, theoretically, objectively, we would all want this: Africa as a strong power, a global influence, a model continent, the way we look at continents like Europe. But at the same time, things on the ground, or what we say, pragmatically speaking, this may not really be a possibility, especially because, and I'll use some word that a friend of mine whom I studied with in high school used, the brainwash that the colonialists used was a super brainwash. There is no single way, and I do not see it in any foreseeable future, that we'll have a united vision. In Africa, some of us speak French, some of us speak English, some of us are Christians, some of us are Muslims, literally, even for those of us, most of us, and I'll be quite honest, for those of us who speak about Africa, it's just more of hogwash. We just talk about it for the sake of sounding pretty with it. But in actual sense, if I can be practical enough, I do not see this happening in the foreseeable future. But again, being a policy student, we encourage ourselves to always be solution oriented. We cannot just say there is no solution. Of course, for every problem, we have solutions amongst us based on what we study, based on what we specialize. To make Africa strong, I'll actually respond to what Fredborn was saying about policies being on paper. We need to get them off the shelf and get them on the field, implement them, and through things like economic development, cultural renaissance, teaching values from birth. And by the way, talking of values, value teaching from birth, In Africa, we had traditions of initiation. Initiation, we have things like circumcision, we have aspects like moranhood in terms of being trained to be a warrior and all that. So once we instill, we as parents, we as brothers, once we instill this Africanacity, for lack of a better word, from birth, childhood, and all that, we will believe in it, because most of us talk of Pan-Africanism, talk of a better Africa, but mostly just in theory. So to make it happen, instill these values from birth, and that way, a bit by a bit, and with time, we'll get it right. Yes.
So Mabango, what you're basically telling us that Africa is not being a superpower anytime soon.
Practically speaking, of course not. Of course not. We are not united in the first place. Looking at the currencies, the dollar currently is the dominant currency all across the world. In the Arab world, you find their positioning. Okay, as we hear, according to rumors, they're trying to circumvent the dollar crisis and to come up with their currency. But for Africa, we've never really spoken about currency. And as a matter of fact, and it's painful, you find that actually the currencies we use are foreign. And even for the currencies we have, you find that, for example, France actually prints currencies for over 4 countries in Africa till date. So till we have the vision right, we have the thinking right, and we are ready to go the hard way, because of course at first it will be the hard way. It will take some time. It will take some time to achieve aspiration number 7.
Yeah, because Benedict Joyce is saying, Mabango, tell us, can aspiration number 7, how can it be actualized, really, that we're not, and that we'll not be living in a platonic world of forms? I think you have really answered that quite clearly. And you also shared some aspects with you that some concepts that I believe Africa cannot be united, but we can have strong African states. That's what he's saying. And then he says that Mabango, correction, after every problem, there is a solution. We have problems after every solution. Okay, I hear you. We hear you, Benedict Joyce. So, and as we are wrapping up, away from these aspirations, now let us look at this Agenda 2063 in totality, and allow me to ask you 2 questions as we are wrapping it up. You see, somebody was asking, is this just a bunch of nonsense? Are we just talking of policies and because there's that stigma that is there with policies, especially in Africa. These people are just saying things, and then and something is not going well, let us create policies, and then nothing happens. So at a continental level, tell us, how can we know that this thing is working, the Agenda 2063? How do we know, especially right now? Is there anything since 2013? Is there anything that we are seeing? And how can we know that it's working eventually, as you are looking at it, in terms of the next decade, basically? How can we tell? That is from maybe 2023 all the way to 2033.
Pardon the question. Are you asking about how do we know that everything is working well before Wachira gets things in order? Looking at the Agenda 2063 and actually all proposals about Africa and everything, literally we do not have a specific measure of implementation or even evaluation, because even in project management, we talk of project initiation, implementation, evaluation, monitoring, and then close. So for Africa, all these phases, these policies are usually, it's like they're implemented from a vacuum, then again evaluated from a vacuum, and usually because of political changes, after every 5 years, we have different leaders, different visions, and all that. So there is no one way of looking at it because of the dynamics we also have. At the same time, even in Africa itself, we have the ECOWAS, we have the IGAD, we have different economic blocks, different social partnerships. So you find times they conflict, and because of the conflicting, you cannot evaluate variables using a specific one parameter. I do not know if I've really answered your question accurately.
No, you have answered the question. You see, for a philosopher like myself, in my own right, there is no bad way of answering the question. When I was asking you that question, I wasn't looking for a definite answer because if I was looking for the definite answer, I would not have asked it. So I think you have really answered that question well. Uh, and now look, let us look at it this way. You know, Tim, you are among the people, and I hope you don't say you are being attacked. You are among the people who advocate for leaving Africa to come and grow Africa later. So let us talk to people like yourself and people who are already there, basically the Africans in diaspora, either by default or by design. How can now the African diaspora contribute to the achievement of this Agenda 2063? Because I've seen a lot of them are really getting interested with Africa. You know, Africa, despite the challenges that we have, there are still some Africans in diaspora who are still interested in their motherlands. You know, Kenyans abroad, Kenyans in Germany, South Africans abroad, Nigerians in London, such kind of things. How can these people and somebody like yourself who will be eventually somewhere, how can you now contribute to Agenda 2063?
About leaving Africa, well, there is usually the ideal and the real. Students of international relations will talk to you about the realist theory of international relations, the idealist theory of international relations. Well, objectively, we are talking of having a pure Africa guided by our moral principles, our value system, and our ethical framework. But practically speaking, things are already bad, and we need to have a pragmatic solution to what we have. For myself, it's not necessarily running away from Africa, then coming to develop Africa. It's more of taking the gospel of Pan Africanism abroad, because if we don't get to them with this kind of message, we don't get those in diaspora to understand the need for Pan Africanism and for pure African ideals, who will tell them about it, practically speaking, talking to them and understanding what they can do for Africa. When you look at the returns that are made from, what should I say, when we compare the GDP and GNP, we are talking of gross national product input, including for people from diaspora. For example, a Kenya living in diaspora contributing to the economy of Kenya. When we talk of, and I'll give a controversial quote, every prostitute was once a virgin. So, we cannot preach morality to a prostitute, not knowing what makes that individual a prostitute. For those of us who are Pan African prostitutes, who believe that, for example, we need monies from abroad to come and boost our economy, it's just an unconventional way of ensuring we have resources. Talking of the resources, of course, all those resources from all these countries we want to go to abroad, those are resources from Africa. They're ours, and we are going to reclaim them. And of course, I somehow agree with Benedict Joyce that at times, of course, we need some resources, intellectual resource, including for people that came from abroad. He mentioned Thomas Hobbes. We have individuals like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who spoke of division of powers and all that. So yes, we might as well need to learn what these people are doing differently that makes them always perpetually ahead of us. Yes, I do not know if I've really answered your question, but I believe I have.
Yeah, yeah. You see, you're basically saying that if Moses cannot go to the mountain, then the mountain will have to go to Moses. Okay. And somebody by the name J.B. Wachira, he's saying that there was a cheeky smile from Timothy after you mentioned leaving Africa. Eddie, okay, I hear you. So Fredman Congo says that Friedrich Wilhelm Hegel once said that Africa is the land of childhood, while lying beyond the day of self-conscious history is enveloped in the dark mantle of the night. So he says that I honestly don't know what Hegel had foreseen in our land, but honestly, he must have seen great disaster ahead. May Hegel's rest where it was. Anyway, okay. So as we are wrapping it up, Mabango, Fred Congo says that I don't know how this agenda will be achieved, but please, if it is action time, not policy making time, let's implement what we have first because we have so much in the house that it is forgotten. Yeah, thank you guys for that comment, for comments that you've sent in through the entire conversation. So, Timothy Mabango, as we wrap it up, maybe you can tell us what are your final thoughts, what are your final comments as we wrap up? Because you're the expert here, you're the policy polymath, as you put it. And just let me rectify. There is no problem with your name. There is no problem in identifying as Timothy because nobody's having a problem with that. What you're saying is that people should be conscious and they should be proud of themselves and their names, and it's not a bad thing. At least you are good, you're calling yourself Mabango. There's somebody who doesn't even say that. So Tim, as we wrap up, what are your final comments?
My final comments. Africa is a beautiful place. Africa is the cradle and the future of mankind. We need to start implementation. We already have the policies on paper. We now need to put them on action. The policies that we have, there are better ways of executing them because, and I agree with Fred Bonkongo, according to what I've seen on the comment section, that for some of these policies you find we just do them based on what we have been instructed to do by our controllers. Because, for example, for IMF to give you a loan of whichever amount, or for Europe, or let's say the EU to support, for example, your climate change project and everything, they usually write even the policy proposal for you. They tell you, we want ABCD for us to guarantee this loan to you. So we need to detach ourselves from what has been ailing us from the first place. You do not attach yourself to a problem and expect a solution. There's something Benedict Joyce spoke about, Plato and forms. As a lover of philosophy, I know about Plato. Plato spoke about the theory of forms, in that everything there is participates in a perfect form. For example, assuming Timothy here is a form, there is a perfect Timothy by itself. The first Timothy that was and the Timothy that I participate in. For every yellow there is a perfect form, which is the most ideal example. So talking of Africa, I don't think we have a perfect form elsewhere. We know ourselves best. We have these problems. We have these solutions. We have the best brains in Africa. These brains are developing Africa. These brains have even ventured into space. We're talking of individuals like Musk. So let's utilize these brains. And in the time of implementation of these wonderful ideas that we have, of course, we need to kick out the mediocrity that we have. Most of these leaders that we keep electing, you find that they have corruption cases. You find that they are very unethical in their speech and deed. So such are the individuals to really crack down upon. We need to push systems of the West and focus on our own systems. The word kakistocracy came through the comments. For the word kakistocracy means a rule by the most useless in that particular jurisdiction. In Kenya, we've actually coined, myself not included, but it's a word we use, tumbocracy. Tumbocracy is a rule by people who seek to enrich their stomachs. So let's stop being corrupt. Let's stop being unethical. Let's foster our values. Let's foster our thinking. Let's work with what we have. Let's solve our problems without mediation, without external solution. I close with a quote from Wole Soyinka. Wole Soyinka told us, I don't know any other way to live, but wake up every day armed with my convictions, not yielding them to the threat of danger and to the power and force of people who might despise me. Long live Africa. Africa is the best. We'll make it the best. One person at a time, one beat at a time, one culture at a time. The change emanates from us. We have the change. Let's implement the change. Thank you, Wachira.
Wow. That is really nice. That's really powerful. Actually, some people are sending some comments on my WhatsApp saying this is a very powerful conversation. And in my language, I'll say Dikuo gerera kana duta duta. That means from whatever you have said, I'm not adding anything or deducting anything. It is just perfect as it is. I know Benedict Joyce will start talking of some philosophy things, let me not get into that conversation right now. But I see you are a lot of support for you by the guy named JB Wachira saying, always insightful listening to Timothy, my school captain, Palace Derehe boys. Glad to see he's still a wise man, dispensing knowledge with a sense of humor. That's nice. You see, the policy polymath, there's that guy by the name JB Wachira is celebrating you tonight. And I also like to appreciate you in a very special manner for sparing your time to always be part of these conversations and trying to make Africans aware that, you know, we should not just be ignorant as people put it. Also like to appreciate everybody who has watched us live and everybody who has will watch this later. You know, I'm laughing because there are some people who are still commenting some things here. I don't know if, let me share with you. Let me share the screen. Somebody, a friend will come and saying that JB, the vision is placed somewhere on a cupboard. Anyway, it's okay. So Timothy, basically, somebody else was sending me on WhatsApp, Leo umeua. You know, they are seeing today you are fully dressed, you are ready for it. So this vision yenye iko kwa kabati, it's high time you start actualizing and using it for the betterment of our continent. Otherwise, I really appreciate everybody. Kama uja subscribe, kindly do so. Please subscribe, share with a friend, discuss, continue the conversation. You can comment on the comments section and we'll still be able to follow it and read it through. So from that, appreciate everybody. I really appreciate everybody. Wish them a very, very wonderful, I don't know if it's weekend. It's like from Friday we'll have a weekend. So have a good time. And come next Wednesday, we will be back here with another insightful, wonderful conversation. And I think Tim has not said this, but I think let me say it for him, that if you want to go on and have a conversation with him, go and check him on LinkedIn. He has a really wonderful LinkedIn profile, just with the same name, Mabango Timothy, and you can have a conversation. You can link up with him, and he'll teach you a thing or two. I don't know why today he has not said the Latin phrase, but let me not allow him to say it. Let us end the show at that. So you guys have a wonderful, wonderful time ahead. My name is Mutathi Wachira and Policy. Ishini gera na sia mobi mubodi. Dayo. Good night.